Good evening, Tyler, and thank you so much for joining me today. I am so honored that you joined me this space, and especially after your presentation at the Winter City Congress, I am just palpitating with inspiration that we have such a wonderful person like you contributing into our community and really teaching our kids to be independent. And I think I mentioned you before. My son also did Catholic version on eco justice, and within 1 year, we could just see our son transformed, very independent. And right now, until the 9th of November, when there was the big snowstorm, he was biking every day. And
Yes,
now he's taking the bus, and just such an amazing independence. So I'm welcoming you, and thank you so much for coming and sharing your time. And happy February! And I just want to know history of EcoQuest because I think we kind of know about EcoQuest, but I really don't know how long it has been, who started, and from that, if you don't mind, please.
sure. Well, thanks so much, Kira. That's really kind of you, that introduction. I think it goes a little bit bigger than me. I think Friday when I saw you and I saw Trent Watts and I saw Robert outside standing in front of Spoken Sport, and there was just a lot of momentum that day and a lot of kind of connections being made in terms of cycling in Saskatoon. So yeah, I'm so happy to be here, and I'll talk first, like you asked, a little bit about EcoQuest. And so I've been teaching EcoQuest for coming up on just about 8 years. And even a decade before that, the program was already strongly run and led by a couple of teachers ahead of me. There was a man named Scott Thompson who created the idea of EcoQuest as part of a master's thesis project. And him and Shelley Leffler were really instrumental in convincing Saskatoon Public Schools that this would be a great idea to start. And the two of them began this idea of teaching this integrated program where they had 28 students coming from across the city. And I think a lot of the things that they did um, have changed slightly, but I think we've really held on to some key fundamentals of what makes it work. And I think one of them is just like we always thought of ourselves as 30 learners working and basically spending the year together and trying to think of it more of a democratic process and allowing the students to have that authentic chance to learn alongside of us. Um, and so I came on board back when the program used to be at Buena Vista Elementary School. And then we moved over to City Park uh, just about 5 years ago already. And again, some changes have taken place. I was a little apprehensive about moving from the space that Scott and Shelley had really established. But we're, I would say, very happily at home in City Park, but even bigger than that, we're at home using the city as our classroom. And so we take these 28 students, and on a typical year, if we go back prior to the pandemic, we would take the students through a course of, on average, about a camp a month. So some type of a wilderness experience each month tied to a project they've been working on. And then the in-between work would happen sort of in between our classroom and the city. And I think we've really done I feel, a good job at making some solid connections around town to allow the kids to learn from people in whatever the areas that they need to learn about. And so we're sort of there to kind of guide and sort of like scaffold and framework everything. But beyond that, the students are able to kind of expand themselves outside of the classroom. And I think a takeaway that we get, it's mostly anecdotal, I think, from parents and kids when they come back to visit us when they're in high school, is just a sense of independence, that idea that they can work towards something, and the city's not that big, and they can really allow themselves to discover things on their own. Much probably like your own experience in working with eco justice is just that growth in responsibility and leadership is huge. So that's a key part of EcoQuest. The nuts and bolts are we get to do lots of great outdoor experiences. We kind of integrate our projects to hit all the curricula through whatever the project might be, and then we try to integrate our physical activity or our phys ed curriculum through active transportation, and then just alternative forms of physical exercise that we can do again outside of the classroom. So that's kind of EcoQuest in a nutshell.
Well, it's quite inspiring. So then, as I understand, the first alumni of the EcoQuest are maybe about 20, 22 years old, or maybe younger than that.
The first ones to go through EcoQuest would probably be like 30 years old now.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it'd be a grand task, but I would love to have sort of an all years, maybe a reunion at some point, or just some type of a way for those people to come back and talk to us. I run into people that either it's parents who said, "Oh, my son or daughter went through," or adults that have come and said, "I was in that class before you were there." So yeah, no, there's EcoQuesters bouncing around everywhere, probably from 30 down to the current class this year, which would be 13 and 14-year-olds. So there's quite a range of them out there.
And then, do you guys have alumni of EcoQuest? Like alumni association
We
of
don't have a
EcoQuest?
Yeah, we actually don't. We do have access to old, contact lists where I think we could easily work in that direction. We have had a few people generously, some families make some donations to create sort of a legacy fund or a fund to allow an EcoQuest bursary to occur. So there are students now who enter EcoQuest and are able to access the application funds or any of the gear required thanks to legacy left by some of the parents of kids that have gone through. But we don't have a formal alumni. I know Outdoor School, the grade 11 program that's housed out of Walter Murray, they've got a really strong alumni group run by the students, and they have fundraising activities they do. I know I've bumped into them because they often present alongside of us. We set up a table every year at the Banff Mountain Film Festival and get a chance to meet some really cool young adults who are on that alumni, and then they again do something similar in that they have a fund in which they give back. Another giving back that they've been fortunate to be part of, it's recycling actually, is Bialing Tony. I don't know if do you know Bialing Tony, Kira?
I think I heard the name, but I don't think I met him or her personally.
He, he's someone that, yeah, you would really, I think, click with quickly. He's a young man who was in outdoor school, grew up car free, and basically about a year and a half ago, uh, became the youngest person to bike around the world. He
Oh, I think I
cycled
read about
from
him.
Saskatoon back to Saskatoon.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, 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 yeah. I think I heard about him.
yeah,
I think one of our
and
friends
one
from
thing he did,
BC. Yeah,
he had some,
go
okay,
ahead.
and he turned and made a donation back to outdoor school. So that's just I think a connection of these students who go through something like what they EcoQuest or outdoor school or eco justice, what it might be, but they have that sense of accomplishment and ownership and that idea of stewardship and that idea of wanting to give back. And I think that's something that is a common ground that we have with these programs, is these kids kind of hold it as something that they probably won't forget. That's hopefully a memorable part of their growing up.
And I think that is absolutely true, Tyler. And kind of two ideas popping up in my brain now that, like with the Winter Congress, we know that data is very important. And I think I didn't mention to you before, but I am kind of a happiness coach. And it will be incredible to see, okay, I went through this outdoor school, and then I recognize my empowerment tool, that cycling is an empowerment tool for an independently growing teenager. Because that's, I think, how parents get kind of frustrated by their teenagers, because you're becoming a taxi driver, right? Like if your child wants to go 6 kilometers to play with his or her friend, then you have to drive. Or as soon as the child turns 16 or 17, they have to drive. So it's kind of a little bit risky, but they have no choice but allow that happening. So I was wondering, like, if there is a data and then see out of the alumni who can be kind of uh, pointing out, okay, because of this school, my individual choices changed, my lifestyle is different. So it will be incredible research for somebody who wants to do that. And I was kind of impressed by my own son that he just became so accountable for everything. Seriously, like before the eco justice, I was kind of a worried mom, wondering, did he do his homework? Do I need to talk to his teachers? And he was an okay student. He was like getting maximum like 80s, like whatever the elementary school equivalent. But now he's in high school. His marks 96, 98, like 100, right? And I do not need to no interruption, no nothing. He is so responsible, accountable. And I might be biased here, but I think it's because of his experience in eco-justice. And unfortunately, it ended very short because of the pandemic. But man, that was incredible, incredible experience. And I felt kind of, why not every child has a chance in Saskatoon? And what does it take to increase funding and maybe have not only two, one for Catholic school and one for public, but to make them even more, right? So, what does it take to get more Tylers and more of equivalent of you and other teachers running this kind of program?
Yeah, I think you're right. Why don't we have more like this? And I think the data would be easy to collect. It hasn't officially been collected, but I think I know that the students that leave our program or that would leave something like Eco Justice, um, I know from speaking with high school teachers that they can quickly tell students that are in their class. They'll say, "Oh yeah, I had a couple of EcoQuesters in our class." I think part of, like you had said, just that non-reliance on somebody else to get them around and to help them with the situation that probably they can handle on their own. Um, there was, I think, somebody a couple of years ago that was looking at doing their master's on collecting that type of research, and I don't know what happened of it, if they changed their mind or ended up with a different topic. But I feel like the data would definitely be there. I know that the argument against a program like ours is oftentimes cost, right down to the idea that for us to do a lot of what we do, we really do lean on the fact that there's two teachers there. My teaching partner, Rebecca, and I um, really have an advantage in terms of being able to do all these outdoor experiences and to be able to bring the outdoor experiences into the curriculum and do these things during the school day would be a real juggle if you're doing this by yourself. But I don't think there's anything that stops somebody from doing something sort of. I think you could adapt a version of what we do that would completely be manageable by one teacher. And I think each school could be doing something like this. I think if we're looking at convincing, if you want something kind of tangible, the idea of getting kids to bike across the city to school or to actively get themselves to school, even whether it's the city bus or walking from partway and taking the bus the other part of the way. Um, we're doing the hard job with students that are coming up to like 10 kilometers from school. So I think neighborhood schools really could do a job of really making sure that they're promoting and really advocating for and recognizing and helping create safe routes for kids to walk to every elementary school and to every high school. And I would be wrong to say that we're doing something that other schools aren't. There's a lot of schools right now that are doing that, and they're really pushing the idea of getting the kids here actively and safely. But there are a bunch of other schools that basically the front of a school is a traffic jam every morning and every day at 3:30, and it's more dangerous than it would be obviously if the kids walk to school, because they're basically walking through kind of a traffic zone, and parents are obviously they're rushed and they're trying to get their where they need to get to, and it's the weather is causing people to need to leave their vehicles running or whatever the case might be. But these school zones really are just can be a bit of a mess at some of these schools. So I think um, I've been kind of in a luxurious position of not really having to battle that over the last couple of years. But I think schools could be doing a better job of just having that sort of idle free zone out front of their school.
Yeah, that is very important point to recognize. You're rushed, but you're actually poisoning your own kid and the other kids, right? And somebody pointed out that the Congress, the kids are incredible ambassadors. Uh, like if you learn something from school, you bring that to home. And I have this amazing observation that kids kind of not scared of being punished because they don't know, right? And they say what they think. And what do you think about that? Like, because I'm reading some literature and it's kind of an interesting perspective about kids being our guides versus we know better. Because the idea is that we are living uh, life based on our experience, right? So, like, I am 50 and my
Mhm.
experience based on my previous 50 years. So, my son is 14 and he will live longer than me, and because he's going to live longer than me, he knows what is good for him, and I have to trust. So I have to trust that because he's going to live longer than me and he's going to inherit the world, they know better than us. It's very different than my parents brought it up. So have you observed that? Do you observe that kind of because the kids who come to your school, probably they are quite a leaders, right?
I think it's not a flip of a switch to be able to kind of just determine or let the class know that that's sort of how things are going to function. But I think we start our year the very first night. Sorry, we have the kids come to us on a normal year. We would go camping like the first day of school, and we kind of get them to meet us in this outside of the school setting, and we can really start to kind of determine boundaries and expectations, but really what they can do to make the classroom work. So I think they do have some say there. But then also on that first night after we've had the kids, we have a parent meeting and the kids stay home. So we just have all the parents come to the classroom. And I think that's the closest approach to what you're talking about. And we're able to have an open conversation with the parents. And sometimes it is a real letting go for them to be able to have that conversation with us and say, here's what we're thinking they can do this year. You need to trust us, you need to trust them. We'll have safety nets in place. They're going to start figuring out how to get themselves here. Most of them will have a phone. If that's something that makes you feel more comfortable, then that's something that they can check in with you when they get to school. If they don't, we're going to figure out and map on the wall and have a logical route. But basically, we're going to put it into their hands. And there's going to be some bumps along the way. And I think we really noticed that uh, the kids that have found themselves in tricky situations that we could never script or practice, that might require, you know, calling 911, or it might require helping out a classmate in need. It could be as simple as a bike malfunction, but I think they really recognize that we're going to push them out there, and I think they're going to be okay. But I think I still, I mean, just probably with all the education that I grew up with and right to my day now, I still sometimes probably overstep and feel like, oh, I better make sure everything's okay. So I think you've got something here that I think we really need to even maybe give more of that trust. But I think myself and a lot of the kids are not used to that. So it takes sort of some small steps to get there, where I think that there's a lot of kids who really probably have it in them, but they're really quite insecure in making some of those decisions. So some kids latch onto that concept of independence right away, and others, it really takes some slow work at it. So I like the idea, but we're not quite there.
Yeah, yeah, it is quite inspiring to see in in September when I'm using the Milasan Trail. There's like 15, 20 kids biking, and they're all having uniform, and it's just such a wonderful feeling to see that independent people are growing, and it's just a wonderful time, I think. So why do you think grade 8, like why it is important to be the program is why on the grade 8 focus,
Yeah,
like
I
about
I
like
obviously
12, 12, 13 years olds, right?
yeah, they're 13, usually turning 14 at some point in the year. Um, they're obviously still at that teenage developing brain stage of their life. The way our school system is set up in Saskatoon is their very final year of elementary school. And so maybe there's something advantageous of catching those kids that have been in that system of their elementary school, maybe in the same building for the previous 7 or 8 years if they went to preschool, um, and then still sort of under that same roof as those primary kids. I think it's a nice breath of fresh air for them. I think it really catches the kids at a point in their life where they are discovering themselves and discovering who they want to be and discovering sort of their worldview. They're also completely full of enthusiasm. They're physically fit and able to do a lot, like basically the things that we do. It's pretty phenomenal what they can do to take a whole grade 8 class and be able to do a very quite a strenuous hike or a jog or to go snowshoeing, cross country skiing. So they're kind of at a nice age where their buy-in for pushing themselves is there. And then I think it it really, I mean, to their advantage. I don't know how much of an advantage it is to the grade. It just so happens that that's their next step is going to high school. And so I think for those kids in Saskatoon, they really recognize that, you know what, this city is not that big. And I think kids that maybe just sort of had it determined for them in previous grades that, oh, all the kids in my class go to Tommy Douglas next year. All the kids in my class always go to Evan Hardy next year. And I think this 1 year away, and it's quite a risk, but also a confidence booster for them to be able to step away from their peers by choice for their grade 8 year. And then when it comes to grade 9, they kind of go in a little bit rolling. I think they start high school, they have that safety net or that comfort zone of their old friends from their previous school that maybe they're bumping into. They've just made a new tight group of people, but they've also recognized that they can branch out on their own and they can find what they need and they can find a teacher or a club or a group of people at a high school that maybe they would have been a little bit reluctant to go out and discover on their own. So I think it sets up well for us working with that grade. And then I think it also sets up well for the students in prepping them for our high school the way it's set up in Saskatoon with our grades 9 to 12 going to high school.
Hmm. Yeah, very, very rewarding must be to be seeing that growth. And you mentioned about the snow uh, move to grow, right? Or is it snow school? You were talking
Yeah.
about at the congress. So would you?
Yeah.
What is the? What was your most win out of that program? Of course, you were planning. When you were initiating something, you think you want to do A, but then things takes their own course. And what was the most exciting surprise for you?
Well, yeah, you're right. I talked about two different things at the World Cycling Congress last week. One of them was the initiative by Saskatoon Public Schools called Move to Grow. So I'm part of a committee where we have uh, taken that idea of really promoting movement in both the staff and the students and how that can be beneficial for your mental well-being, for your physical wellness, for your community, for your a whole number of reasons. And that's a little bit broader than what we're doing at EcoQuest. And then the concept of snow school, the way that it was designed is an idea that I had when we applied for a community grant with a company out of Minnesota to outfit our class with a small fleet of fat bikes. And
Hmm.
so the idea was to create um, a program within EcoQuest where the students would be basically learning how to ride the trails on these fat bikes, which most of them have never done before, maintain the fat bikes and keep them, cleaned and running properly. Um, and then kind of graduate that to also using our cross country ski skills and the ability to use snowshoes that we have access to at school. And so, sort of those three winter sports, uh, our class, and this is sort of kind of on pause right now because of COVID. I'm still stuck in, we're not inviting classes to our class yet. But basically, the end goal is to have other classes within the city. And I want to get kids coming from the community schools that don't have access to these pieces of equipment to come spend an afternoon with EcoQuest. And our class would be the instructors, they would be the leaders, and they would rotate the other students through stations where they would have a chance to fat bike along the Wasson Trail and then head over to Kinsman Park for a cross country ski and then back over to the Meewasin Trail for a little snowshoe. So, yeah, snow school is coming. This year is just amassing the fat bikes and getting the kids used to riding and maintaining them. And so that's where we're at now. We're just not quite at the spot where we feel comfortable and safe to bring other classes to do the full next stage where the kids become the instructors. So my goal hopefully is to double the amount of bikes that we have, and so by the time we kind of get things rolling for next year, is to have a fleet of about 10 fat bikes as well as the class set of cross country skis and snowshoes to go forward with snow school. So that was sort of the idea that I was talking about at the Congress last week. But again, because of just the delays in getting things rolling with the snow school, it's really been sort of in-house. We've been able to just take advantage of these fat bikes. Um, and yeah, it's something that I think there's going to be some excitement next year when we can kind of grow it to other classes being able to share the excitement and the fun with us.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing it. And I don't want to keep you long, and I'm so grateful for your time and for the listeners and for the followers that we want to share this interview. What would you like? What would you recommend if somebody wants to say, okay, I'm going to be like them, like those people who bike in winter, and so how one has to start, or like, is it a body system, or is it just join the group, or because like,
Well, I mean, there's also yeah, it can be daunting to go and join a new group at whatever stage of life you're in to kind of seek out and join a new group is sometimes outside of people's comfort zone. So it might just start by just finding the places where you feel comfortable if it comes to riding a bike, that is. Um, and you'll probably start to bump into some people along the way and you'll have strike up a conversation. You'll quickly realize that the community here in Saskatoon is open armed in terms of cycling and getting people more out there. It's quite small, so you'll find there's probably overlaps between different people doing different types of cycling, whether they're commuting or whether they're riding it for excitement on the trails. If they're using the Wasson Trail with their family, there's you'll see a lot of overlap with who those people are. Um, so I think, yeah, don't feel that I think sometimes cyclists, if we call ourselves that, can kind of pigeonhole ourselves into that idea of somebody who's uh, on a thousands of dollar road bike covered in lycra in a race somewhere. I think if we can really normalize cycling and the people that are wanting to get into that group aren't feeling an intimidation factor, I think that there is a lot of pretty low key things that you can do on your bike to kind of open the door. And then from there, maybe you kind of set something else that you want to try. Maybe you want to go discover the St. Barb trails. Maybe next you want to try going for a gravel road ride in the summertime. There's some really beginner friendly or family friendly or all age friendly places that you can go not very far, either in or from Saskatoon that can kind of get your feet wet in terms of cycling. And then maybe your next step is you say, you know what, maybe I want to try carrying a little bit of gear on my bike. Maybe I want to try bringing a sleeping bag, and maybe we're going to try sleeping out and then biking home the next morning. And you can kind of just let your imagination go a little bit in terms of how you can kind of find some fun and find your new level of comfort zone on a bike. So yeah, so I guess just get out there and don't be afraid to be intimidated by this kind of closed circle of cyclists. I think we're all just people wanting to get around, and some days it's on a bike, and some days it's on foot, and some days it's in a car. But we're, whatever the case might be, we're just all people moving around.
Absolutely. So you kind of,
Maybe that's what I would leave as a message.
yeah, it seems to me like, step by step, baby steps, because it is the goal to normalize winter cycling. And right, like, so, I guess just always important to start somewhere. So mentioning that
Exactly.
friendliness, family friendliness, I just want to let you know that our hot drinks outside, because I was listening to other people, and we are moving to Saturdays, include families, especially to kind of recognize the realities of pandemic. So see you there, hopefully. And thank you so much for your time, Tyler. I really, really so much admire what you do, and just feel so inspired to just observing you. And thank you so much for everything you do for Saskatoon.
I'd throw that right back at you, Kira. I think it's just you bring an energy and a sort of a why not attitude to everything that you do, and I think people your enthusiasm is infectious. So I'm really happy with the hot drinks outside. I look forward to my visits with you there, and I think anybody else that joins is going to quickly realize that yeah, you're a tremendous person for our community and in terms of our cycling community. So thank you, Kira.
Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting the back praise, but thank you, thank you so much,
You
and see you around.
sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.